The next one is misleading presuppositions. Misleading presuppositions is pretty simple. It just means that the person saying this thing is assuming something that they shouldn't just assume, right? It should have to be proven. So here I said cutting taxes always helps an economy grow. That needs to be shown. It might be true, but you've got to provide evidence for that. You can't just claim it, right? Because whether or not cutting taxes helps an economy grow is at the core of proving this argument. It cannot simply be assumed by the sayer. Now the next one is straw man. A straw man is a straw man is where you build up an artificially weak version of an argument, and then you kind of attack that weaker version. So here I've said refusing to lower taxes is the same as robbing from the citizens. I'll never support burglary from our citizens. Okay, fair enough. Most people would not support robbing our citizens. But the straw man is saying refusing to lower taxes is the same thing as robbing from the citizens. That's artificially weak. Nobody who is saying that we should keep our current tax rates or increase our tax rates is saying that we should rob from the citizens. They would totally not agree that that's what they're doing or that that's what they're saying. So oftentimes a straw man, here's a tip-off that you're dealing with a straw man argument. If the person whose argument is being attacked would not agree that that is a fair characterization of their argument, it's likely a straw man. Okay, the next one is a slippery slope. A slippery slope is simply where we're assuming a line of events that will not necessarily occur or occur in that order or occur without debate on each point. So here, if we don't cut taxes, then pretty soon the citizens will rise up in revolt. When the pitchforks come out and the common people come for their leaders in the night, they will realize they've made a grave mistake. In order to prevent this sort of apocalyptic situation, we need to lower taxes. So you see, this author has gone from, if we don't cut taxes, there's going to be an apocalyptic uprising against the leaders of the country. Okay, that's a pretty far stretch in most cases. You see how there's a line of things that are assumed here that need to each be shown. For example, if we don't cut taxes, then pretty soon the citizens will rise up in revolt. You need to show that. You need to show right there that if we maintain the same tax rate, then the citizens will indeed revolt. And even then, you haven't proved that they're going to, form pitchforks and mobs and come for their leaders' heads, and right. Each of those things needs to be proven in order. Or we need to just stick with a more basic claim, like if we don't cut taxes, then the economy will not grow. Okay, so the slippery slope simply proposes a series of events that are not logically going to stem from this one decision. An inconsistency is probably the simplest informal fallacy. An inconsistency is nothing other than applying logic to one thing and then applying different logic to something else. If you remember the argument types from Unit 4, this would be something like inconsistent application of principles, or inconsistent application of moral theory, or even inconsistent use of a definition, defining a word. Any of these would fall under the term inconsistency. So here's an example. Taxes are needed to fund the common good, so we all need to chip in as best we can. But poor people have less income, so they should be exempt from paying taxes. Now, this is actually a very slight fallacy, because the basic line of argumentation is strong, and that is that because poor people have less income, they can't be expected to contribute to the common good as much as maybe wealthy people. But if it's saying on the first hand that we should all chip into the common good as best we can, but then saying poor people should be completely exempt from contributing to the common good, It seems to be a bit inconsistent in that respect, only because it was so declarative. If it had started by saying taxes are needed to fund the common good, so those who are able should chip in as best they can, but poor people are not able and therefore should be exempt. That might be a stronger argument. But because this came right out and said everyone must chip in the best they can, but poor people, just can do nothing, and so they are exempt from the category of all people. That's what makes it inconsistent. Again, this is a mild fallacy, but it's a fallacy nevertheless. Next, we have begging the question. Begging the question is a bit like a false presupposition, but instead of assuming the presupposition, it not only assumes it, it actually is circular. Okay, the conclusion argues for the presupposition. So, or the conclusion assumes the presupposition. So, cutting taxes is always good because low taxes are a move in a positive direction. You see why that's circular, right? Because we're trying to prove the conclusion with the premise, but then the premise is assumed in the conclusion. So cutting taxes is good. Why? Because lower taxes are good. Why? Because cutting taxes is good. You see how that can go on forever. So begging the question is simply where the conclusion assumes the truth of the premise in the statement of the conclusion without further proof. Okay, the next one is appeal to irrelevant authority. Now be careful here. There is a good appeal to authority. Okay, using authorities who are in fact authorities in the field, in the topic, multiple examples of them, is a great way to strengthen your argument. But oftentimes people use an irrelevant authority. And what I find more often than not is that people appeal to a kind of generic authority. For example, instead of using, in this case, the opinions of an economist, they just use a smart guy like Einstein. So they might say Einstein was a huge proponent of low tax rates. Well, who cares, right? He was an astrophysicist. He was a mathematician. He was not an economist. Now, if there's some reason to believe Einstein held some kind of insight on this, great. But on the face of it, it's not his field. Yeah, he was kind of a smart guy, but that doesn't mean that he knew how to fix race cars, pick up women, and correct the economy, right? He was just good at things he was good at. Now, if you use somebody like Joseph Stiglitz, who's a Nobel Prize-winning economist, now you've got somebody who can talk about tax rates. Next is attacking the author. Attacking the author is very simple. You've all seen it. We've probably all done it. It's when we attack the person making the claim or the person opposing our claim instead of attacking the argument itself. If you want to see this, just tune into one of the presidential debates. So here, say, if you don't want to cut taxes, then maybe you're just a communist. Right? It's saying, so instead of actually addressing why the person might be against tax cuts, it just says, you're a communist. And we all just agree that communism is bad. Right? So that's the nature of attacking the author. I don't think that needs a lot of explanation. The next one is an appeal to force. Now, a key here, an appeal to force is often called an appeal to coercion. Force does not always mean I am going to physically make you do something. It just means that the person is being coerced. They are being led to a conclusion by threatening their self-interest rather than by convincing them of the truth of the argument. So here, instead of convincing them that lower taxes will help the economy, the person might just say, if you don't help us with this bill to cut taxes, then your constituents will vote your opponent in the next election. So, lower taxes seem like a good idea, don't you think? In other words, it's appealing to the person's their desire to be reelected, not appealing to their good judgment about whether or not this plan will actually work. Okay, last page. So the appeal to pity is where you insert the idea of caring for someone's emotions or outcomes instead of logically assessing the situation. So in this case, don't you have any care at all for the people who are having to give 38% of their hard-earned money to the government? It's not like the government put in all those hard hours in the office. So in this case, we're trying to gin up sympathy for the worker who's having to pay taxes, rather than addressing whether or not lowering those taxes will actually help the economy. Now, whether or not a worker should have to pay this much tax when the government isn't actually doing the work might be a great topic for discussion, but it's not immediately addressing the claim we should lower taxes to stimulate the economy, right? So it's completely off topic. Next is the argument from ignorance. This is frequently misused. An argument from ignorance does not mean an argument from a person who we might call an ignoramus, okay, or an argument for someone we just consider stupid. That's actually attacking the author, right, or attacking the person. Even to assume that they're too stupid to know without actually evaluating what they say is attacking the person. An argument from ignorance is not that. Rather, the argument from ignorance is arguing that something must be true because it has not yet been proven false. Why is this bad? Because we all know, for the most part, from our legal system especially, that an argument has the burden of proof, right? Saying that I should do this, you have the burden of proving to me all those steps of the should argument. It's not that I should just accept it because I can't prove the opposite. So in this case, how can you be against a plan to cut taxes and stimulate the economy? There's absolutely no proof that cutting taxes will hurt the economy. Okay, fair enough, but even if that's true, is there any proof that cutting taxes will help the economy, right? And even if there's no proof, is that because there's been studies that have shown the opposite? Or is that because there simply have not been studies conducted on this topic? Okay, those are the kinds of things we would need to look at when dealing with an argument from ignorance.